So I just want to go over real quick some of the uh, pending upcoming events and kind of how I see them unfolding. And I mean, there's some other things that I think are going to happen. Um, well, there's some other things, but I'm going to focus right now on just the Civil War and how it's going to unfold and a timeline of events that I think are going to take place very quickly. So let's just go over the timeline of events. The first one is going to be the protests move into riots around the Democratic and Republican national conventions and become more violent. I think that's obvious. Once people start to realize, like, there's nothing they can do to stop the Israel. Excuse me. There's nothing they can do to stop the Israelis and the Americans' assault on Palestine. Um, it's gonna go left, and once you get to once you start to move into the national conventions, it's gonna go from protest to riots. Um, yeah, it's gonna go from protest to riots. It's gonna because people are gonna get frustrated. They're gonna get tired of the crackdown by the the Zion Nazis ordering the crackdown on protests, and then that's gonna probably somebody's gonna get beaten to death by the cops or something like that, and it's gonna go from protest to riots. Uh, then, but it, so then you have the election. So you have the Democratic and Republican national conventions. So that's going to draw a lot of protests. Again, protests that are going to escalate into riots very quickly, um, to the point they may have to cancel these events. After the first day, or a couple, after the first day or so, it becomes the situation becomes untenable, and they can see that it's spiraling out of control. Um, so then we move into November. We move from like July, August, September, October, November, right? So we move into the elections. I believe that Donald Trump will be poised to win the election, or he will win the election. Around that time, uh, that it's evident that Trump will win, is poised to win or will win the elections. Things start to get progressively worse. Um, Sparked by obviously Trump is a polarizing figure, the media, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So the crackdown, if you the mix of the crackdown by the Israeli American government, you know, um, they're gonna have to crack down, and like you see the Israelis ordering the American henchmen in the Congress and Senate, all of that. You see them ordering crackdowns, right? So the Israeli forced crackdown mixed with uh, you know um, the violence taking place in Gaza and the protest against that by people opposing that situation, and Israelis ordering their political hordes within the U.S. to crack down on anybody that dissent. It's gonna be a backlash to that. That backlash for uh, against what they're doing is going to make a volatile mix. Um, and then when you add in the Trump being a polarizing figure, and people feel like they're not being heard by the Democrats. So they realize the Democrats are controlled by Israel, the Republicans are controlled by Israel. They're being, they are ordering, the Israelis are ordering a crackdown and trying to pretty much a full takeover of the U.S. power structure. That crackdown, as we're witnessing now, mixed with the polarizing figure that Donald Trump is, the neglect by the Democratic Party to support their own people, and people realizing that there's really only one party and there's no difference, the backlash to that is going to create, basically a volatile situation. That's going to play out around, that's going to start to play out around the Democratic and Republican conventions. That's going to move in to the election where Donald Trump is poised to be elected or gets elected, right? So Donald, so at the time that Trump wins the election or is poised to win the election, something bad looks like I think is going to happen to him, and he'll be removed by force and violence. You see, now you can make of that what you will. I just think something's going to happen to him, um, and I could speculate, you know, but you know, we all know, you know what I mean. I could speculate how it could happen, but there's many different ways, you know. But it will be by force of violence, and I think that'll happen around be right before the election, where it looks like he's poised to win, or right after the election, between him being elected and his inauguration around that period. Like in that election period, in the back end of the election to the inauguration, like in that period, I think that's going to happen to him. Something's going to happen to him, and he'll be removed from the playing field. Um, Obviously, that's going to create more, progressively more and more volatile situation, leading to civil unrest. It begins via sporadic riots and attacks by various groups. I would say think to say it's safe to think it's safe to say it ain't safe outside. Supermarkets, concerts, large gatherings, etc. You know, Dylan Roof style. You know, where it just won't. It's safe to say it won't be safe, right? Like it'll start to get progressively worse. Um, where you see it's not like people lining up on like a North and South 1800 Civil War. It's going to be more like just people saying, I don't like this group, I don't like that group, and then launching attacks on different groups, right? Whether it be political, racial, etc. Right? People will be pissed off at the Israelis, the Jews, etc. for the crackdowns. They're gonna be pissed off because their politicians abandon them. Some people will be pissed off because they don't like Trump. You know, all these different things is like pouring gas on a fire. Generally, the racial discrimination that blacks experience and the neglect by the political class. You got tens of millions of migrants coming across the border. People, being pushed into people's neighborhoods. You'll have events where they begin to attack. Let's say they're mostly pushing them into black communities. So you may have events where the migrants, they're not getting the support they want, and then something happens and they attack, uh, the migrant immigrants, whatever, anti-black immigrants. They get hostile and start attacking the black populations. So you'll see all that kind of thing going on, where just adding to more fuel to the fire. Um, at basically just huge amounts of civil unrest that the cops are probably um, not ready to handle. Right? Whereas now they can go out in the street and they can be like, "Move back, get back," but get back, and then smack somebody, and then you know, pull you into a group of cops and arrest you. That they won't be able to do that because there'll be too many people, and then they're gonna get progressively violent. You have people coming to these protests armed, stuff like that. So that you can imagine that those, as those protests turn to riots and get violent, you'll have that kind of thing going on, and then you'll have people just, Dylan Roof style attacking groups that they don't like. but it'll be a little more organized than just Dylan Roof, like random lone wolves. Um, and so, but that maybe that'll be after Trump is replaced by a Democrat, and then just to add more fuel on the fire, I believe Trump will get replaced by a Democrat. Blacks will overwhelmingly support that, obviously, um, and this will be a fatal mistake for black people in the United States. Um, Instead of staying out of it, which they should, saying, "Listen, we're not voting, right? We're not getting what we want. You're giving everything to immigrants and Israelis and Ukrainians and Africans and South Americans. We're not getting anything out the deal. Fuck your elections. We're not involved. We're gonna boycott the election." Instead of doing that, what they're gonna do is make a fatal political error here, and they're gonna support a Democratic candidate who's going to get somehow pushed into office. I'm thinking Trump being replaced by Biden, Harris, Obama, you know, something along that line, right? Is going to happen. And once that happens, then you got a race war on your hands, right? Once that, because then black people, they're going to get scapegoated and say, well, they overwhelmingly support the Democrats, you know, these Negroes, right? The so-called African Americans overwhelmingly supporting the Democrats are going to get blamed for Trump's demise and the insertion of Democratic candidate to replace him, which they obviously will overwhelmingly support, and they'll get scapegoated, into more of a downward spiral, leading to racial attacks on blacks everywhere, supermarkets, events, uh, large-scale violence, right? That the police are not equipped to handle because it's just too much breaking out everywhere. So now you got, a civil war, race war type of situation um, taking over. And the violence will be so widespread between the riots and the sporadic attacks everywhere. That's how the civil war will look until it just escalates more and more. And then it's just, you know, pretty much every man for himself. So nobody's gonna line up on a firing line, but it's safe to say it won't be safe outside. It'll be more difficult for you to go to the supermarket or to a church, anywhere where there's large gatherings. You'll need security, heavy security, and generally the security will probably have to be your own people because everybody will be trying to secure themselves in their particular location, whether it's their home, whether it's getting their wife and kids to school, to the market. It'll safe to say it'll get. Not to mention the economy will start to collapse. The dollar, things like that, will start to collapse because the spiraling unrest in the United States, and so you'll see that kind of thing taking place where it just spirals, and you'll have pretty much blacks scapegoated for the whole Donald Trump demise, as well as replacing Trump with a Democrat. Um, and at that point, it's game over. That whole thing, because that whole thing is going to be skewed with corruption by the Democratic side. Not that either side is any good, but the Democratic side, they obviously are going to push that, some way to take advantage of the demise of Trump, and then whether they're involved or not, and then they're going to push their candidate forward somehow. I don't know if they're going to have a special election, whatever, but they're going to replace him. The blacks will overwhelmingly support that candidate. They'll get scapegoated, in the midst of already ongoing, uh, escalated riots and things. They'll get scapegoated for the demise of Trump and things, being tilted back to the Democrats. Uh, at that point, it's game over. The whole thing is gonna blow, and then it'll be crazy everywhere. But there'll be no like lineup like you know North versus South. It'll just be everywhere all at once. Where you got people who are just like, man, fuck this, and they're gonna just click up, and then boom, they're gonna just start saying the only way to solve this is obviously violence, and then you're gonna have these large groups just of disenfranchised people. And now blacks who are getting nothing out of this shit at all are then going to be left to fend for themselves, and they're going to get scapegoated, targeted. They're going to have to fend for themselves against uh, immigrants, millions, tens of millions of, millions of immigrants, right? At least illegal immigrants. You got about, 10 million of them, not to mention their legal immigrant cousins, right, that are here that don't, anti-black, all coming out the woodwork to attack black people. Obviously, the white people who, coming out to attack them. Um, Indians, you name it, right? So it'll be extreme. The group right now that is the most disenfranchised and the most vulnerable in the United States is black people. That's the same group that's gonna get it the worst, because everybody that don't like you now, they're not invested in trying to preserve any of the, so-called social fabric. They just want what they want, and you are the black people will be seen as the scapegoat. And since they're the most vulnerable and the most easy, well, they're gonna catch it the worst. So anyway, I don't want to make this too long. I gotta run, but I think that's how, basically, a quick look at the timeline of events leading up to the civil unrest and then the civil war, which will basically is going to spiral into a race war. And if you're a black person, you probably should be aware that you will. It'd be safe to say it won't be safe for you to go outside. When you're outside, you'll have to be on high alert, because everybody who don't like you, out of all these groups, won't be incentivized. There's no incentive to try to get along with you at that point. Actually, they're gonna feel incentivized to attack you, and you have to understand that. That's just the way it is. Right now they're being subsidized and incentivized to play ball with you and go along. Once they feel like they don't need that, and blacks, they used to being disenfranchised. They used to voting and getting nothing. You know what I mean? It's like not like blacks are gonna wholesale. They'll just be sheep to the slaughter. They're not. They don't. They don't care about getting anything. I mean, it's just like people in my family. I'll say, like, you're not getting anything out of these elections for like the past 100 years. And they say, what am I supposed to get? I just want the right to vote. Well, you know what? That's all you're gonna have left, right? You'll be standing around with your dick in your hand and the right to vote, while all these other people are looking at you like food, like wolves, right? Like you're an obstruction to what they want, even though you're not getting anything out of it. And so you're gonna be left vulnerable. You know what I mean? Like, you're not really trying to get anything. You're not getting anything. The Israelis are getting something. The immigrants are getting billions of dollars. The Israelis are getting billions of dollars. The Ukrainians are getting billions of dollars. The white people, other people in this country, they're economically, they're poised on top of you, and you're a bottom caste permanently. But the black people are not going to revolt. They're going to be sheep to the slaughter. They're going to be the sacrificial lambs. Even though they're not getting anything, and they want to rah support Democrats overwhelmingly or whatever, it really don't matter at this point. But they're gonna get scapegoated, and they're gonna be left to fend for themselves while the hordes are at the gates. So you figure it out for yourself. That's all I got.